are now joining us, good morning. I am Tanya Gibson. We have been discussing the topic of Dred Scott and the Civil War all morning. As you may already know, Dred Scott was a slave from Missouri whose court case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to declare emancipation for him and his wife. He went to Illinois and Wisconsin on the account of his slave owner and stayed in these northern states for long periods of time. The decision was that since Scott was not a part of the sovereign people, that he could not bring suit in a federal court. The decision was the primary cause of the bloodiest war in American history. With us is an expert on the Civil War. She wrote the book, What Broke America, the Civil War. Here's Dr. Barbara Brackman. First, I want to say thank you for being here today. Thank you. So I just want to jump right into it, if you don't mind. I read your book and I have to say that it was a very interesting read. I'm very surprised to say the least. What stood out to me was your chapter on the primal cause of the Civil War. You wrote, "The bloodiest war in American history was caused by the stubbornness of the Mexicans. Their refusal of giving up their land in the West incited the problem between the South and the North. The problem of the North not wanting to expand slavery created the tension for the Civil War." Now, I'm going to try and disregard the fact that you think slavery should have been able to expand, but please elaborate on this. Yes, there are more facts of the Mexican-American War provoking the United States to ultimately breaking. The Southerners pushed for this war to gain more land for slavery, and if you were to just take your feelings from slavery, it was actually an economic gain. I mean, all that land could only be used for agricultural advantages. And the Northerners knew this, but they had such a big problem with slavery, and their biased thoughts caused the only war on U.S. soil. Dismissing your support of slavery, again, the Mexican-American War brought upon intense sectional division in the United States. That's very true, but that was not the primary cause of the Civil War. The decision of the Dred Scott case is what initiated the fuel to the fire and what made the North and South split. But that was in fact a minor bump on the road to the Civil War. It had impact on the North, yes, but it was not the root of the Civil War. Dr. Brackman, what year did the Mexican-American War and the Civil War happen? The Mexican-American War started in 1846 and it ended in 1848. The Civil War started in 1861 and ended 1865. Okay, so you mean to tell me that a war 15 years before the Civil War was the primary cause, but the Dred Scott decision that was 4 years before the Civil War was not the primary cause? If that was the case, the Civil War should have been 5 years before the Mexican-American War happened. Why didn't the Civil War happen after the Mexican-American War? The Southerners pushed for this war to gain more land, and in the end, they lost. All that land over at the West ended up being free states. That right there is the reason for them to go on a ruckus and cutting up and separating themselves from the Union, but they didn't. Because this tension was building up all these years, which pushed the South to the point of wanting to break off on their own. And if you wanted to use time as a deciding factor of when the Civil War should have happened, then anyone can say the election of 1860 was the primary cause, and it happened a year before the Civil War. No, the election of 1860 caused the Southern states to secede from the rest of the Union, but the Dred Scott decision made the Northerners fearful of the South expanding slavery. That right there is the reason why the Civil War started, because of Southerners wanting to expand slavery and not being able to. I just do not believe that the decision that a slave could have been free was not the cause of the bloodiest war in American history. Dr. Brackman, that was not the decision that was made by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was that African-American slaves, they were not considered American citizens, so they could not sue in a federal court, and the slave owners could take slaves in Western territories and still be classified as a slave. How about we clarify what the Civil War was about, because your idea of the Dred Scott decision was so far off. The Civil War was the breakdown of the Union because of the tension between the North and the South. But let's make this clear. Dred Scott may have crossed the line of Missouri, making him free for a couple of years, but he went back into a slave state. Let's not forget the Missouri Compromise. I mean, this case doesn't have any significance to the Civil War because the arguments of Dred Scott are invalid.
Count on compromise on compromise. These compromises covered a bigger issue of the hostility between the North and the South. And once the Dred Scott case was brought about, there were no more compromises the government could make. And there is a reason to bring out there's no reason to bring out compromises to defend your reasoning, because the United States Supreme Court forgot about them when making this decision. The Compromise of 1850 wasn't even acknowledged in this case, and that had such an effect that it resulted in a civil war.
I believe you are making this way too personal. You are dismissing facts, and you are trying to stretch this idea of this decision having an impact. I still don't believe a black man was the cause of this war.
Believe it or not, the Dred Scott decision played the most prominent role in igniting the Civil War. Thank you again, Dr. Brackman, for coming on to my show.
Thank you for having me. Maybe I can come back and we can have a sequel to this discussion.
Don't hold your breath.